Alright. I had to get out of there. I was in there so long that I had my egg cracked. Twice! For the past, however long it's been since that last video, I've been putting together a plan to put a decisive end to all of the biggest rivalries in history. DC versus Marvel, Star Wars versus Star Trek, WWE versus AEW. I've had it with all of these undecided winners. How else are we supposed to analyze countless decades of human artistic expression without narrowing it down to the most meaningful metric? Conglomerate-owned brands and franchises. So, being that clowns are naturally objective judges of quality, I've decided to sit down and settle some of these age-old scores. Ooh, but where to start? I would have gone for bronchitis versus strep, but I guess this has more mass appeal. Now, anyone could just make a video comparing these big fellas' film appearances, but I look like this. Clearly, I'm quirkier than that. So, instead, I'm going to be comparing these behemoths' appearances in a medium slightly outside of their comfort zones. In this corner, he once terrorized North Carolina. Probably Godzilla. And in this corner, the American Nightmare, King Kong! In 1978, Hanna-Barbera, the classic animation powerhouse known for all of that, produced an animated series based on everybody's favorite super-sized Muppet, Godzilla, airing 26 episodes across a frankly absurd amount of airing blocks until 1981. The show follows the crew of a research vessel known as the Calico, comprised of its captain, a scientist, her assistant, nephew, and the greatest character in all of fiction, true monster royalty, Godzuki. Also, they shoehorned in an uncle character for Godzuki? Kind of cringeworthy if you ask me. Every episode goes about the way you'd expect it to. The crew happen upon some sort of mysterious land or circumstance. Halfway through the episode, Godzilla helps them out. Something happens that really seems to shake up the crew as a giant monster appears, and then Godzilla shows up a second time to destroy it and save the day with his incredible strength and weird human growths. It's not a show you watch for its grand innovative storytelling. It's as predictable as can be. Not that that's a bad thing. The strictly formulaic format is a big part of why it was perfect rerun fodder for years, despite its remarkably low episode count. That said, watching the whole show back to front was really a struggle to pay attention. Even when there's something like Godzilla in Atlantis or Godzilla versus the giant snowman at you, it manages to be so boring it's genuinely kind of remarkable. This show could take the wildest plots you can imagine and make them uninteresting. Like if the Godzilla crew ran into, say, a group of people who religiously worship a cerulean mollusk, which I guess you could also call a blue oyster cult. I am genuinely shocked to report that the only parts I actually cared about were somehow Pete and Godzuki's goofy antics. And even then, those were the equivalent of seeing a funny billboard on the longest, most boring drive of your life. You'd think that Godzilla, by way of 70s Hanna-Barbera, would at least be morbidly fascinating to watch. But it's so boring that my script editor gave up on coming up with an apt metaphor. That's not even getting into how wildly the show deviates from really anything the films ever did. Which is to say, why do they summon Godzilla with a garage door opener? One time I popped way too many Flintstones vitamins, and everything around me looked like Godzilla vs. Hedorah, so they didn't get everything wrong at least. It's possible I'm being just a bit too harsh on the show. I mean, there's still plenty of fun action, a lot of quirky moments that had me losing my mind, and every once in a while, the monster even looks decent. It's just something that doesn't really vibe with me. So hey, what can you do? I will say I commend them on making the bold choice of taking a character that breathes nuclear fire and deciding, yeah, that's not enough, he needs laser vision too. Hey, wait a minute! Weird roar of his. The fact that they summon him with a garage door opener. Those laser eyes. He's a robot. I guess you could call him some kind of mecha Godzilla. Overall, I think it's an okay novelty where you can enjoy a good few episodes, but it's nowhere near a full watch. Now then, let's take a look at Kong's offering from 12 years prior to see if the King of the Jungle fares any better. Zilla heads, get ready to see then cope. I'm not about to sit here and pretend that the King Kong show is some tragically overlooked masterpiece, but from start to finish, it's an unexpectedly fun, strangely addictive ride that you just can't look away from. A co-production between America's Videocraft International and Japan's Toei Animation, its premise is simple. The Bond family, made up of a dad and his two kids, Bobby and Susan, wind up on Skull Island, where they meet and befriend Kong. Monkey business ensues! It's pretty much a similar setup to the Godzilla cartoon. The key difference being that in the time that I've taken to describe the show, you could have probably watched a decent chunk of an episode. Each episode's only around 6 minutes. And the time that Hanna-Barbera Godzilla takes to fight one monster, Videocraft Kong could have taken out an entire civilization like 4 times! Okay, yeah, the DVDs for this show aren't complete, so I'm not sure if they ever pick the storyline back up. But if they don't, I think Kong just did a whole genocide. So speaking of the mass murderer with the big mass himself, this Kong's actually a pretty funny guy. Hanna-Barbera Godzilla kinda just acted like a Disney World animatronic on steroids. While this show's Kong has a personality of a really big puppy, instantly more endearing. Paired with the smaller, more tight-knit human cast, it's just so much easier to care about the characters in this show. It feels like watching cute little home movies from a family with a giant ape. Even Kong's dastardly adversaries in this, I repeat, 6-minute per episode show feel so much more impactful than the average Godzilla Barbera villain. And they're led, of course, by the nefarious Doctor Who? Now there's a crossover. This is almost as epic as the time Kirk told Amuro to use the Force. Man, I love Stargate, but I would be a fool. A dunce. A literal clown. Okay. Scratch that one. If I failed to mention the absolute legend himself, you could call it a mechanic Kong. Just not the same. This rampaging robot might seem familiar. For that matter, so might the idea of King Kong facing off against a Doctor Who. That's because after this show's run, its producers Rankin and Bass
Yes, that Rankin and Bass teamed up with Toho to create a live-action version. That's right, the King Kong show is actually the basis for many elements of King Kong Escapes.
So if being the superior show wasn't enough, how about the fact that the King Kong show literally inspired a film from the studio behind Godzilla itself? I think we have our clear winner here. So, tune in next time for yet another matchup, Government Surveillance versus... Well, anyone can get lucky in a one-match bout, right? For legends this big, I think it's worth giving them a second round, don't you think? Let's look at some slightly more recent animated incarnations to see how they stack up.
That's a lot of fish.
Godzilla had a rough transition into 3D. Wait.
Sorry! I mixed up my other two super original, do not steal video ideas. I don't think I have to explain to you how poor the reception of TriStar's Godzilla 98 was. You've heard about it. I've heard about it. That record's so overplayed, the needle's torn through the PVC and pierced to the center of the Earth by now. This animated series was developed as a sequel to the film, and we're not going to do that. We're going to look at it as a standalone product here, ignoring any of the film's faults, and not concerning ourselves with who's all to blame for the problems of the film.
Continuing from the film's cliffhanger ending, the show follows movie lead Nico Tatopoulos after he finds one of the late Godzilla's eggs, which hatches into a new Godzilla and imprints onto him. Joined by faces new and old, he leads the Humanitarian Environmental Analysis Team, or HEAT, a group that deals with assorted freak occurrences that, more often than not, result in a new foe for the Big G to fight.
That team name is fitting, because this show is here... Okay. One at a time. This is actually really good. For one, the cast is just absolutely wonderful, even if the writing gets a little too bogged down in cliched late 90s catchphrases. It excels in portraying a totally natural feeling group. Even the way they're constantly at odds with each other, more often than not, serves as to reinforce the idea that these are real people, real comrades, and not just an uncannily perfect kid show cast.
What's the matter, Van Gogh? Run out of subway cars to tag?
Or sleeping. What's the matter? Getting bored now that you don't have Nigel to tamper with?
It's far too complicated to explain.
Faster than light radio waves? What's so complicated?
The show also features some incredibly interesting storylines. If it ever feels like it's starting to become formulaic, it won't be very long until it throws out a fantastic new concept, be it chasing giant rats through New York, finding an underground alien base, a documentary-style found footage episode, and a massive 3-part saga with shades of classics like Destroy All Monsters and vs. Mechagodzilla. Through it all, the show maintains that expert balance you expect out of Godzilla, between horror, comedy, pulse-pounding action, and of course, down-to-earth character exploration that never feels forced or unnatural.
It's definitely not without its faults, of course. I could live without Ian Zierling's G.I. Joe-esque happening what felt like every single episode. And I'd be lying if I said that I don't wish I could have skipped a few episodes. What? Reaction's not big enough for you? What would you rather I say? That it sucks so bad I wish I had Gigan's buzzsaw rammed into my neck? That I want someone to come in and destroy my oxygen? What do I look like? Some kind of angry nerd? But yeah, jokes aside, this show's got a lot of great monster madness in it.
Would I recommend this show? Yeah, if you think you'd be into a Godzilla series by the people behind the Men in Black cartoon, not to mention a surprising amount of folks who would go on to work on Transformers Prime, including Jeff Klein, who helped develop Godzilla the series, with some quality animation, great laughs, and the sense that the creative team really cares for their work.
It's gonna be pretty hard to beat some Gino Kino like that. Now, funny enough, this next series is actually created in an attempt to directly compete with Godzilla the series. That's right, we're talking Kong, the animated series. I like how they add the word animated in the title. Wouldn't want to confuse people into expecting a real monkey. Oh, but this show's already started innovating. Unlike the last story we talked about, this cast uses a plane instead of a boat. I was starting to get seasick of that. I'm hollow on the inside, just like the Monsterverse Earth. Kong, the animated series, follows Jason, who has a special bond with Kong, due to this series' Big Ape actually being a clone derived from Jason's DNA combined with the original Kong's. In the first episode,
Jason and his friend Tan end up on Kong Island along with their professor, Ramon de la Porta, who then reveals he's hatched an evil plan to steal the island's prized primal stones. Using the cyberlinks developed by his grandmother, Jason is able to transfer himself into Kong's body, bringing Jason's martial arts experience and Kong's sheer strength together. De la Porta gets away with most of the stones, but Jason, his friends, and the island shaman Lua dedicate themselves to stopping the professor from gathering all of the stones and performing some magic bumbo flumbo spilly dilly whatever.
I'm so sorry, it somehow slipped my mind to mention this. Jason could go into Kong's body, right? Sure, but Kong can also go into Jason's body. It's the most incredible thing about this show. He just shoves him in there like it's a briefcase.
Kong inside a shrimp toast like you? Dream on, man.
I'm not sure I can talk about the show without feeling like I'm picking on someone who just dropped their wallet down the sewer drain. I'm gonna feel actual remorse for this. The characters range from extremely boring like Jason to unbelievably annoying with Tan. And despite the absolutely wild premise, they managed to do so little that's actually memorable with the world of the show. I think the best example of this is the merging concept. It's the big gimmick of the show, but half the time it barely feels like it has a purpose for being here.
Like, sure, it's kind of awesome when the villains merge with a random animal and mutate them into Kong-sized beasts. But when our two leads, Jason and Kong, do it, it's just like, he gets bigger and kinda glowy. According to the dialogue, Kong gaining Jason's martial arts know-how is a major ace in the hole, but in practice, we never really even see what difference it makes. Kong rarely fights without Jason in his head, so we're never really even given a reason to believe the merging makes a difference.
Okay, so like we're mid recording the audio for this, and I just realized the reason why you never see him fight is because while watching the show, I constantly saw him fight without Jason in his head, and it looked exactly the same!
I made a joking remark about it earlier, but genuinely, Jason stuffing Kong in his head is a much more interesting use of the concept. It lends itself to much more intriguing stakes. It's much more visually obvious why it would be helpful. But also, it has a clear physical and mental effect on Jason, which means the characters have to make tough decisions about when and they should or shouldn't use this power. Oh my god, I'm trying to think critically about Kong the animated series. It doesn't help that the show has some representational issues. The two shows I talked about from the 60s and the 70s did obviously have some messed up depictions of native peoples, but Kong is obviously a much more recent show and still has some of the things I raise an eyebrow at.
Welcome to China. My name is Wu Chan.
Delighted to meet you.
I welcome the competitors to the karate tournament. If you would like to follow me, I will drive you to your hotel.
Obviously, I'm not the best equipped to discuss these things, seeing as how I'm... But the depictions of non-white peoples in this series don't strike me as amazingly sensitive ones.
And on top of all of those writing issues, the show's production quality is just truly not up to par, feeling much cheaper overall than Godzilla the series ever did. The animation is much less sophisticated, the art style honestly puts me to sleep, and technical quirks that make the show so hard to look at. It feels less like a worthy competitor to Godzilla the series, and more like a licensed coloring book come to life.
A coloring book might actually be better. At least then I could imagine my own stories. Godzilla felt like he had a wonderful variety of stories throughout his run. Kong's plots feel incredibly samey. Godzilla had a gorgeous style with so much character baked in. Kong feels like an incomplete mess. Godzilla feels powerful. Kong feels weak. I know it may seem unfair to compare it so directly to a different show, but Kong was created as a competitor to Godzilla the series. The show consistently fails at everything it sets out to do, and it's really hard for me to look back on it and not feel fatigued from how unremarkable it is. The main saving grace for me in the show is this villain, Howling Jack Crockett. Jack's a fresher take on the big game hunter stereotype that you see a lot in giant monster shows like Godzilla and Kong.
Jack used to be a big action film director who got blacklisted due to his blatant disregard for stunt crew safety. So instead of just wanting Kong as a trophy or whatever, his goal is to capture Kong and force him to star in one of his films to revitalize his directing career. Add in the incredible voice talents of Richard Newman, and Jack ends up being one of the most memorable villains in all of the shows we've looked at today. A big highlight is an episode where he hosts a television special about Kong, interviewing other villains from across the show's run and getting into all manner of hijinks. It's one of the better stories in the whole show, but unfortunately, it, and Jack as a whole, aren't enough to outweigh the sheer amount of awful within the series.
I'm ruthless. I can't even let Kong have Howling Jack Crockett. I suppose if you're just in the mood for your basic early 2000s action cartoon, it might scratch some sort of itch. But honestly, with so many other options, this would be far from my first recommendation. I feel like if I had grown up watching this show, it would occupy the same space Martin Mystery does. Seemed really neat. Even had some cool elements that I got really drawn to as a kid. But really don't feel like I would have ever had the desire to revisit it as an adult, even just for laughs. Compared to that, Godzilla the series is something I think I would have loved as a kid and love even more as an adult, which makes it the clear winner of this matchup. I'm shocked, I really am! I thought Kong would best that big lizard. What, with its lovable characters like that guy who looks like an animated version of Thew from Toy Grind, but like, if he was racist.
Every time Tan was on screen, I thought he would look directly into the camera and call me slurs.
So yes, Godzilla comes out on top, persevering despite a rocky start. But we still need a winner here, which means it's time for sudden death. There's tons of stuff we can look at. We can look at some more recent stuff, or some more obscure content. I'm 100% certain I'll figure out something. Man, what does it matter? Do I have to declare a winner here? I mean, if Godzilla won, it wouldn't make me like the Hanna-Barbera show anymore. And if I said that Kong won, I wouldn't come around to Kong the Animated Series. Does it really matter who gets some arbitrary winners? You know, maybe the whole versus matchup life just isn't for me. I enjoy too much about both these guys to definitively say I like one more than the other. And it's not even like enjoying one of these movie franchises more than the other even says anything about me as a person. Pick a champion. For what? To serve as fuel for some other people's time-wasting message board crusades? To motivate other people to jump into the metaphorical trenches of the internet? The stench of digital blood lingering in the air as they fight? Tooth and nail? Over a matter as abstract and subjective as which brand is better? So people can call each other rude words because they don't like the movie where Godzilla does a little dance. We're talking about something as harmless as big rubber monsters. Why put so much stock into the best one? Whew. You know what? I think I'm gonna put my energy into some enjoying and criticizing what I want on my own terms. I imagine y'all don't want to clown in a leather jacket to tell you what franchise is enjoyed by big brain jockey guys and which one is enjoyed by lonely geek nerds. We really don't need to create lines and start fights over something like that. And we should try and explore it outside our comfort zones. Trying new things that don't follow the same lines that we're used to, but still might hit just as hard in their own unique ways.
You know, that's probably a good idea. I'm glad you didn't devolve to senseless fandom wars nonsense, because that's kinda cringe.
Well, thank you, plastic action figure of a copyrighted character that I have absolutely no ownership of. It's kind of funny. I was worried there for a second that you were gonna eat me or something.
Well, while I enjoyed your message, it's kind of weak as a video ending.
Oh.
See, Kong? This here's my friend Tan.